There are 3 total BS myths in the spiritual world that I'm going to debunk. Myth number 1. Spiritual awakening is an endpoint, the final destination. Once you get there, you've arrived and there's nothing else, when actually, it's only the beginning. Myth number 2. Positive thinking can get you to spiritual awakening. Let me tell you this. No amount of love and light, wearing white, saying affirmations causes spiritual awakening. Myth number 3. You can intellectualize your way to spiritual awakening. Spiritual awakening has nothing to do with the mind. It has everything to do with your frequency resonance and how high it is. Your mind alone will not raise your frequency resonance. So thinking, reading, memorizing, or analyzing will not get you to spiritual awakening. In this video, I'm going to share 3 takeaways that not only debunk these myths, but will also help you discern your best pathway to awakening. My name is Cheong. I catalyze your shift from the ordinary to the exhilaration of the quantum by giving you the tools to change your frequency resonance so that the life you live matches the life you dream of. So let's get going. Takeaway number 1. Spiritual awakening is a resonance level. So what is a frequency resonance level? A frequency resonance level is simply a rate of vibration. So the higher your vibration becomes, the more you approach the level of vibration required for you to have the awakened experience. Now, what the hell is an awakened experience? A lot of different philosophies will talk about it. A lot of different spiritual traditions will try to describe it. But it's at that point that you start to really realize, not as an intellectual concept, but as a visceral feeling, a visceral knowingness within you that you are infinite, indestructible consciousness, intrinsically part of the One, and that you co-create your reality. So that rate of vibration where awakening happens is the beginning point. It's the point where you start to have this awareness, this feeling, and it's not a thought. It's a visceral feeling. So that is the beginning, because really awakening is an infinite process. Now, a lot of people will read about how to get to awakening, what to do, what the steps are, people's descriptions of what the awakening process is, which can be helpful. But your awakening process is specific to you. It is your path. But the thing is, reading about it or thinking that you understand it as a concept isn't actually awakening, because it's done nothing to your vibrational level. You actually have to vibrate higher in order to get to that threshold. And you can't do that through your mind. Understanding a concept or someone else's experience of it isn't the same as you vibrating higher. So the thing about intellectualizing awakening is that it can trick you into thinking that you understand it and then maybe you are there. But you're not really, because your frequency resonance or your own vibrational level isn't matching what is required in order to have that experience. Your distortion patterns are heavy and are the things that keep your frequency resonance low. So in order to get your frequency resonance up to the level where you can start to experience spiritual awakening, you have to release the distortion patterns that keep your frequency resonance low so that your frequency resonance can rise. It's the vibrational level where, again, you start to experience yourself as infinite, indestructible consciousness, where you really drop the mind in the sense of that being the dominant place of your consciousness. You really move into the experience of yourself as infinite, indestructible consciousness, having embodied experience. So depending on who you are, when that happens will change for you, and what it will look like will be specific to you. You'll know that you're releasing that intellectualization that so often happens with spiritual awakening, that happens in the mind, when you start to not care so much about it. Like you don't really care what your experience is compared to someone else. You don't really care that there's a story around it. You're just in the experience of it. So you know that when you stop having expectation, you stop having as many assumptions, and you stop having story around awakening, that you're actually starting to experience awakening itself rather than a story from your mind. I have a client, Brett, who came from a very strict religious family, and when he finally broke free of a lot of religious dogma, he started chasing spiritual awakening in all of these different modalities that he hadn't been exposed to before. The more woo-woo the modality, the theory, the more he was fascinated by it. And he would sort of collect these different theories and ideas of what spiritual awakening was and sort of like put them together in a little cocktail of like bag of what it was that he thought a spiritual awakening was. And because of his fascination with spiritual awakening, he started meeting women who were also likewise fascinated by it. And they wanted to embody what spiritual awakening looked like, or what they read that it looked like. And because he didn't have the same experiences that they did, he thought, well, there's obviously something wrong with me. They must be the awakened one, and he would give away all his power to them. Clearly, these relationships weren't equal. When he started doing frequency work and releasing his distortion patterns, his frequency resonance started to rise, and this odd thing started to happen. He started to let go of all of those stories that he'd learned about what spiritual awakening was supposed to be, what he needed to do in order to get there, and he started to just feel his frequency resonance. He started to experience what it was to be embodied consciousness. And he started to have those experiences that seemed so out there to him before without him having to chase it. Now, this changed his relationship with his girlfriend because she had a very intellectualized idea of what awakening should look like. And his experience was violating her rule set of what that meant to her. And what he realized was, wait a minute. She's trying to control who I am and how I'm being. And I can see that now because I have the space to see it. Maybe this isn't the relationship that I thought it was. Maybe I'm not less than her. Maybe she doesn't actually know more than me. And so they ended up splitting up. The funny thing is, as he drops his need to have an intellectual experience of his awakening, of his need for story, he's more and more present in the moment in his unique expression of awakening as it unfolds for him. And the awesome thing is he's closer to awakening now than he ever has been. Takeaway number 2, walk your talk. What I mean by this is that it's not enough that you say spiritual stuff and hope that you'll awaken. It's really about being in alignment and integrity because that's what gets you to that threshold of awakening faster. So, a lot of people really want to say things like love and light, or they want to take on the persona of an archetype of spiritual awakening that they've read about. But all that stuff is just fluff. It takes work to look at self, to be aware of what's happening within, to be aware of what your distortion patterns are, so you can release them and you can rise in your frequency resonance. And the thing is, even though it can be hard, what you do and what you say needs to be in alignment with and in congruence with the frequency resonance that you want to embody. If you're behaving and talking in a way that is not in congruence with what it is that you wish to be in terms of spiritual awakening, you're not going to be embodying spiritual awakening. I mean, I've met so many people who talk the spiritual talk as if they are awakened, but then they treat the waiter like crap. That is not an awakened being. That is someone who is deeply incongruent and needs to be aware of what is happening within so they can release those distortion patterns and come into a higher level of alignment. So the difference between intellectualizing and embodiment is this. Intellectualizing is an idea based on a story or something you've read or something someone has told you, and your mind creates an idea of what it means to spiritually awaken. There's a meaning associated with it, rather than just being in the experience. So embodiment means that you are in the process of having this awakening unfolding within you and being human at the same time. It doesn't mean you just chuck your humanness. You are human. You are meant to be messy. You are meant to be imperfect. It's okay that you are. So to be like, okay, I'm having a human moment. I'm having a hissy fit. Maybe I wasn't doing the best there. I could do a little better. Perhaps I need to apologize. Taking ownership of your humanness is part of the embodiment. It's not about negating your humanness. It's about acknowledging it and being like, okay, so I had that reaction, that response. That wasn't necessarily the best. I'm not that proud of that moment. What in that caused that? Meaning, what is the distortion pattern that caused that incongruent action that I'm not that comfortable with? And then to release that distortion pattern so you can come into a greater level of alignment. So how do you know that you're being in congruence? How do you know when you are in alignment? Now, the thing about congruence is it can be really difficult to describe. So one way to know that you're in congruence is if your internal state matches your external reaction. So let's just say there's somebody who you're at a party with and she said something which could be interpreted as slightly, let's call it, nasty. So here you are being like, it's okay in the big picture. It's all good. I'm going to send that person love and light. When inside, you just want to scratch your eyes out. So what you're really thinking is, what a bitch. Right. Those two things are not the same. So if you're feeling that inside you're really angry and you really can't send this person love and light because you just want to slap them, that's a good indication that you're not in congruence and that you need to release the distortion pattern that's causing the reactivity within you, that's causing that disconnect. Remember that it's okay to be human. It's okay that you're angry. It's okay that you want to scratch your eyes out. What is important is that you recognize that incongruence within yourself of that anger and sending love and light, because those two feelings aren't the same. So when you notice that there is that incongruence, it's to acknowledge it and to go deeper into, okay, well, what is causing that? And what distortion pattern do I need to release to come into alignment? The more you're congruent, the more you recognize dissonance within yourself, the more you can release your distortion patterns and rise in your frequency resonance, because that's the thing that will get you to that spiritual awakening that you're looking for. You know, my spiritual search was over 25 years long, so I had an opportunity to witness a lot of guru-type people over that time. And what I noticed is that invariably the same story would happen over and over again. So someone would come into healing abilities, or they'd have a spiritual awakening and they'd want to go help other people. So they'd spread the word or practice whatever it is that they learned. And what would happen is that people who they were teaching or who they were helping with their abilities would start to give their power away to the guru. And the guru would start to believe what it is those people thought of them. They would start to believe their own marketing, their own hype, and they would stop looking internally at their own distortion. They would stop clearing themselves because they thought they were better than everyone else. And things would just get weird. Sexually inappropriate behavior would happen. People would do things they weren't in congruence with because they were told that it would lead them to spiritual awakening. So things just got really not cool very, very quickly. Everyone assumes that once you are spiritually awakened, that you're just going to stay that way infinitely. But remember that spiritual awakening is a frequency resonance. And when you act out of congruence or out of integrity, your frequency resonance will drop. So what I've noticed a lot with guru types or even healer types is when they act out of integrity, their frequency resonance drops and they're no longer in that awakened state. And what they start to spread instead is a whole lot of darkness. A lot of what causes that story, the expectations, the thoughts that create the intellectualization of the spiritual awakening, as opposed to having the awakening experience itself, is all that mind chatter. So if you'd like to slow down that mind chatter and turn down the volume of those thoughts so you can be in the unfolding of the awakening experience in the present moment, then click on the link in the description below for my free Quiet Your Mind group frequency calibration. Takeaway number 3. Have the courage to take a good, hard look at yourself in the mirror. Now, when I say this, I don't mean physically look at yourself in the mirror and look at your body. I mean, take an unflinching look at who you are, all your strengths, all your weaknesses, all the things that you want to improve. Because the thing is, unless you continuously look at yourself, it's difficult to know what it is that you need to release, which is important if you want to raise your frequency resonance, which is what's going to get you to that frequency threshold of awakening. When we look at ourselves in the mirror, sometimes when we look, we can often find things that we overly judge ourselves for, or that we're critical of, or that we're failing at, and that we sometimes don't even like about ourselves. So it's important that when you are starting to release these patterns or even becoming aware of the patterns, that you notice where you're being overly harsh. You notice where you're being overly lenient, and just to notice what there is going on within you and start to release the distortion patterns. Because when you release those distortion patterns, your frequency resonance starts to rise. And when that happens, you gain more and more clarity over what it is that you truly are and who you truly are, so you can release your patterns in a way that's most efficient for you. The other thing to notice when you're looking at yourself in the mirror is to notice if the stories that you're saying to yourself or the things that you're saying to yourself are really yours, or if there's something that you've heard said by someone else, like your mother, your grandmother, a close friend. Are they really your things that you say to yourself, or are you just absorbing them from the people around you? When I was in my spiritual journey and before I started frequency work, I had tons of fear, but I didn't actually really realize that I had a ton of fears. I just had a lot of control issues. That's how I would have described myself. So I was really careful with everything in terms of our business. I had everything mapped out. I would always spreadsheet how much time we had before we had to sell the house and move in with my parents. I was always concerned about something happening to my husband, Chris. So I'd want to know how he was getting places and when he was coming back whenever he went on a motorcycle journey. And when I started to look at myself in the mirror, I thought, okay, well, this is just control issues. But when I looked deeper, I realized, whoa, wait a minute, this is not control. This is fear, and the fear is out of control. And when I started to release those distortion patterns, I started to feel lighter. And I didn't really notice it at first because it was a little subtle, but soon I stopped spreadsheeting. And then when Chris would go away to motorcycle with his friends, I wouldn't be worried that he wouldn't come back. Somehow, I just had this feeling that everything was going to be okay. And not only was it with Chris and being okay physically and coming back home, but it was like okay generally. Like I'd released that fear that something terrible was going to happen to us financially. And instead, I had this knowingness like it's going to work out somehow. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to still work and still put effort for it, but I wasn't like freaked out about it all the time. And my resonance started to really rise. And as it rose, not only did that feeling of well-being in terms of everything being okay be there, but also this feeling of connection, of knowing that I was intrinsically part of the one, of being in flow. Now, I'd heard people talk about flow, but I'd never really known what that was, and I kind of dismissed it as kind of stupid. But flow is this really wonderful sensation when you are surrendered enough to be able to drop into it. I've noticed from my experience of my frequency resonance rising, it's not like this steady incline in terms of your resonance. Your resonance will bounce up and down. So some days you'll feel better, other days you'll feel worse, even though your trajectory is generally upwards. And I have to tell you, when your resonance is really high and it drops, it doesn't feel that good. So what I learned from watching the gurus is it's important to have people around you who love you enough to tell you, hey, have you taken a look at that ego pattern? Have you noticed this is happening with you? And to consider what they're saying and to watch for your own distortion patterns constantly, because your ego mind can totally hijack your own integrity, your own alignment. And it's important if you want to have that higher frequency resonance so you can experience that awakening, that you really are staying within your own integrity. If you want to learn how to release more of your distortion patterns and raise your frequency resonance, check out my next video. See you inside.